Welcome to the debate following the movie, and in particular, welcome again to Rifat Audeh and to Lema. Just for an introduction to both the panelists, Rifat Audeh is a filmmaker. Actually, this is his first movie. By training, he is actually a mechanical engineer, and he also has a master in journalism and media and journalism from Newcastle, from the University of Newcastle in the UK. And he has been a long-time activist, and as you have been watching the movie, he was on board of the Navi Marmara. So he's a sort of a boat movie instead of a road movie, this one. On ma droite, Monsieur Luis Lema. Luis Lema est reporter, journaliste au Temps, journal quotidien de Suisse romande. Et il a, au fait, vécu à Jérusalem pendant les années de la deuxième intifada comme correspondant du Temps. Il est aussi l'auteur d'un très beau livre issu de son expérience à Jérusalem et plus largement en Palestine et en Israël, qui s'appelle Couvrir le désastre, publié par les éditions FILMER de Genève. Et il continue de couvrir l'actualité du conflit israélo-palestinien et plus largement du Moyen-Orient, toujours pour le Temps. Donc, je propose, I suggest, je passe du français à l'anglais parce que Luis Lema souhaite parler en français et Rifat Audeh en anglais. So, the idea is that we will have a couple of questions for each of them, and then the floor will be open for questions to you. So my first question is to Rifat. Actually, in your boat movie, it was not a movie like the others, meaning that you were not only personally involved, but you risked your life. And I mean, my first question is actually to ask you how the project came up and how you lived through all of that.
Thank you for your question. And also, before I answer the question in details, allow me to thank the organizers once again and the volunteers of this film festival, and thank all of you, the audience, for attending the film. In regards to your question, I will speak slowly for the interpreter as well, because I also work as an interpreter and I know how difficult their job is. So, in regards to the question, I did begin filming when I was aboard the Navi Marmara. And I always wanted to document this event, which I believe is a historic event, and it was a historic event at the time. We all knew how important this event was. So I wanted to document what we were doing, and I had in mind that I was going to make a documentary about it. Of course, when we were on the ship, we thought that we would reach Gaza. And so I believed at the time that the conclusion of the documentary would be very different than what it turned out to be. Of course, we were not expecting this attack to take place as it did. And so when that happened, the idea of the documentary itself took a very different turn. And I had to document what happened, of course, regardless, either way, whether or not we reached Gaza or after the attack. I still wanted to document what took place. And I felt that after the attack, it was even more important to document this for history and for the world to know what really happened. What happened at sea, what the truth was out there at sea. So I began on this project back in the 2010-2011 timeframe. But then for various personal reasons, such as my work and so on, I was forced to stop working on it. And then in 2016, after I graduated in media and journalism, I obtained a master's degree in media and journalism, I thought that the time was right to continue and complete the project, and I did have the time to do so. And so I worked on it from 2016 to 2017, and then it was released in September of 2017. Now, why did I go on the flotilla and pursue this activity? I've been an activist all my life, and so it was only natural for me to proceed in this fashion. And prior to that, I had also attempted to go to Gaza via one of the land convoys, but I was unsuccessful in reaching Gaza at the time. I had to turn back because the organizers at the time told me that I submitted my name too late to join the convoy. And so the flotilla was my second attempt to reach Gaza, which I failed, but maybe third time I'll be successful. So that's it in a nutshell, briefly.
Thank you. Luis, le film de Rifat expose clairement une des grandes questions, celle de la hasbara, de la propagande israélienne. Et je pense que cela est un enjeu auquel tu as été confronté à plusieurs niveaux dans ton métier de journaliste quand tu étais sur le terrain. Je n'ose pas imaginer combien de fois l'ambassade israélienne a interpellé le Temps au sujet de tes écrits et de tes billets.
Plus que ça.
Et enfin, si tu pouvais nous aider aussi de ton côté à décoder les éléments que Rifat propose dans son analyse.
So if you all agree, I will speak in French. I feel more comfortable. So giving more work for the translator. Mais effectivement, le contexte est très simple. Hein, c'est que dans le conflit israélo-palestinien, tout événement qui montre Israël sous un jour défavorable a été simplement mal expliqué. Donc on n'est pas conforme à la réalité. C'est tout le travail de cette hasbara israélienne de rétablir la vérité en allant aussi loin que possible dans l'explication, hein, puisque hasbara veut dire ça, mais dans la propagande. C'est-à-dire amener des événements, les répéter, les redonner, jusqu'à ce que les faits correspondent à la version israélienne et non pas l'inverse. C'est à ma connaissance le seul pays qui fonctionne de cette manière, ou qui fonctionne en tout cas si efficacement de cette manière. C'est-à-dire que moi, quand nous écrivons tous, journalistes sur cette région, mais encore plus pendant cette période qui était très tendue de la deuxième intifada, on avait deux jobs en un, si on veut. C'était essayer de trouver la vérité autant qu'on le pouvait, quoi. Donc aller sur le terrain, interroger les gens, décrire ce qui se passait. Et puis deux, c'était répondre à cette campagne qui dénaturait les faits et qui remettait fondamentalement en question ce que les journalistes, ce que les témoins, ce que les acteurs eux-mêmes avaient vécu. Donc ça double le travail, ça divertit aussi et ça rend le travail au quotidien beaucoup plus difficile pour un observateur extérieur. Donc là c'est un travail admirable qui a été fait sur l'épisode de la flottille, mais des exercices comparables ont été faits, notamment si vous vous souvenez de la mort de cet enfant qui s'appelait Ad-Doura, Mohamed Ad-Doura, au début de la seconde intifada, qui est mort dans les bras de son père. Ça a donné lieu à une campagne et un déluge d'opinions contraires, de commissions d'experts, de fêtes, etc., au point qu'il fallait que tout le monde se mît à douter non seulement de l'existence de cet enfant, de la culpabilité israélienne, mais aussi de la mort. On en est venu à dire que tout ça était une mise en scène et que cet enfant finalement n'avait jamais été tué et qu'il était tranquillement installé en Jordanie. Donc c'est encore une fois quelque chose qui est quasiment consubstantiel du conflit israélo-palestinien. Et peut-être juste encore une toute petite chose à ce propos. Ce que moi j'ai perçu très clairement, c'est une sorte de... Il y en a eu plusieurs, mais un virage fondamental qui a aidé les Israéliens, enfin les autorités israéliennes, hein, les gens en charge de cette propagande, d'aller de l'avant. C'est bien sûr le 11 septembre. À partir de cette date-là, à partir du 11 septembre, les choses étaient complètement différentes et ça devenait incomparablement plus simple pour les Israéliens de justifier ces affaires. Et à partir de là, si on regarde le fond de la justification, on est beaucoup moins du côté israélien sur le fait de justifier les faits que de décrédibiliser l'ennemi, l'adversaire. Ce sont des terroristes, ce sont des membres d'Al-Qaïda, ils font partie d'une autre civilisation que la nôtre, nous autres peuples civilisés. Donc ça trahit deux choses. Ça trahit le fait que la politique israélienne en tant que telle est de plus en plus difficile à défendre, mais aussi le fait qu'il est beaucoup plus facile de rejeter n'importe d'inventer n'importe quelle thèse, n'importe quelle explication, du moment que les autres en face sont des terroristes et qui sont par définition coupables avant même que l'événement se passe.
Et c'est très intéressant ce que tu mentionnes parce qu'en fait, l'histoire de Mohamed El-Dour est doublement compliquée du fait que celui qui a filmé et photographié la scène est un célèbre reporter juif français, pendant les années d'Oslo, d'accès à la fois aux représentants israéliens et palestiniens, et donc c'était particulièrement gênant. Parce que...
mais les images avaient été prises par un caméraman arabe.
Si, sauf que lui il était à côté. Petit détail, enfin, bref. Bon, moi je pense que c'est temps de vous passer la parole et the floor is yours. Oui.
Ma question s'adresse à vous, Monsieur Lema, qui est journaliste au Temps. Est-ce que le Temps actuellement pourrait publier un article sur le travail d'un groupe de chercheurs israéliens, un article qui s'appelle Shrinking Space, dans lequel ils parlent de comment différentes organisations proches du gouvernement ou membres du gouvernement travaillent pour faire du hasbara partout dans le monde. Je pense à ça parce qu'en lisant ce rapport, on voit comment les personnes envoyées par le gouvernement israélien sont venues en Suisse, à l'ambassade israélienne à Berne, pour s'entretenir avec les parlementaires suisses, pour leur convaincre de la nécessité de soutenir la motion IMART, Christian IMART, 2017, qui voulait criminaliser toutes les organisations, en loi qui aurait criminalisé toutes les organisations qui soutenaient des revendications telles le droit de retour, la libre circulation, etc. Donc, dans ce rapport, il y a plusieurs exemples extrêmement concrets par rapport à la Suisse. Donc, pour essayer aussi de ramener la discussion ici, à détourner l'attention par rapport à ce que le film est horrible à voir, même si on pense qu'on est blindé, c'est horrible. Mais Hasbara, il est là tout le temps. Donc, première question, est-ce que le Temps vous autoriserait de faire un travail sur ce sujet qui est fait pas par les membres de BDS en Israël, mais qui sont faits par les anciens ambassadeurs, qui sont faits par des académiques, etc., et qui parlent de ce mouvement de Hasbara et combien c'est dangereux? Première question. Deuxième question. En tant qu'activiste de BDS, je me positionne, on a de plus en plus de difficultés à répondre, avoir un droit de réponse dans les journaux, particulièrement en Suisse alémanique, dont on sait que la plupart des journaux sont sous l'égide de M. Blocher. Alors, les journalistes parlent de BDS comme une organisation antisémite. BDS a toujours une position très claire par rapport à toute forme de racisme. On parle de nous en tant que terroristes. Et puis quand on demande un droit de réponse, on nous dit que c'est pas possible parce que le journaliste n'exprimait que sa position personnelle. Et on monte dans l'hiérarchie, on s'adresse au conseil des journalistes. Est-ce qu'on a le droit? Et puis finalement, le seul recours, c'est d'aller au tribunal et puis ça coûte beaucoup d'argent. Donc,
In the film, you don't say anything about what happened to you all when you got off the boat. We have one mention from the one gentleman there who says he was beaten twice and then a third time when he arrived in port. What happened to you all? What happened to the cargo? Could you describe some of that, please?
Thank you for your question. Originally, the film was an hour and a half long. And I had to cut out many parts of it because it was too long and I didn't want to bore the viewer and I wanted to focus on the message of propaganda. So in the original version of the film, I do talk about what happened with us afterwards. After the Israelis controlled the ship, we were all detained. Everybody from all of the ships, the Mavi Marmara and the other ships. There were about 700 passengers or so on the flotilla between the Mavi Marmara and the other ships. At the time, what happened was that the Israelis controlled the ship after about 45 minutes or so, 40 to 45 minutes. They had complete control of the ship. Pretty much all of the men, we were tied. We had our hands tied in front of us or behind our back. Some of us were blindfolded and some were not. The abuses, after they obtained complete control of the ship, continued. These abuses that took place were described in the UN Human Rights Council report as amounting to torture in some cases. So many of us were beaten, many of us were prevented from going to the washroom. Some people had bones broken. I was one of those people. They broke a number of my ribs at the time. Other people, as I said, were prevented from going to the washroom, including the elderly. An elderly gentleman was forced to urinate on himself at the time because they would not allow him to go to the washroom. And verbal abuses, humiliations throughout the entire time against everybody, pretty much. The women did not have their hands tied, I believe, but they were separated from us. And this continued until we were let off the ship. By the time we arrived at port, it was nighttime because they took the ship very slowly to the port, and they had turned off the operating systems of the ship as well, which means that there was no ventilation, no proper ventilation on the ship. The washrooms, of course, the plumbing systems, let's say, in the washrooms of the ship were not functioning, which made things more miserable for us as passengers. The abuses and the beatings that took place included the injured as well. There were many people who were injured and they were not spared from these beatings and abuses. Like I said, by the time we arrived at the port, it was nighttime. And then they led the people off the ship in phases, or in groups, if you will. By the time I was led off the ship and the people with me, surrounding me, it was about 4 or 5 a.m. the next day. So this was 24 hours after the attack had initially begun. And then they took us all to a prison in the Negev desert. And we were there between, I'd say, 24 to 72 hours, because some people were released prior to others. The Israeli authorities were in a hurry to get the prisoners released because of the political pressure on the Israeli government at the time, because the images were broadcast to the world on the alternative frequency. And there was a lot of political pressure being exerted on Israel at the time by various governments, but particularly Turkey. So that's in brief what happened to us.
Sur le traitement de BDS par la presse, je vais faire plus vite parce que c'est moins, on est moins au cœur, c'est plus intéressant d'entendre ce qui s'est passé de première main. Je parlais tout à l'heure du virage qui a été le 11 septembre dans cette politique et dans cette explication israélienne. L'apparition de BDS, c'est le deuxième gros tournant. C'est-à-dire qu'à la suite de ça, le gouvernement israélien décide de mettre en place le ministère des Affaires stratégiques, qui est en gros le ministère anti-BDS. Donc on repart à l'attaque. Et là, toute la rhétorique qui entoure ce mouvement, l'antisémitisme supposément attaché à BDS, etc. Ça, c'est clair que c'est une énorme, c'est une énorme couche qui est ajoutée par le gouvernement israélien et puis dans laquelle il faut passer entre pour pouvoir parler de la réalité. Ceci dit, le Temps, comme beaucoup d'autres journaux et médias ici en Suisse ou de par le monde, parle aussi de ça, parle de cette campagne. On a beaucoup parlé des pressions qui sont exercées précisément sur les parlementaires suisses et les moyens dont tout ça a été présenté pour que ces parlementaires avalent la version qui leur a été donnée, etc. Donc cette manière de voir, de dire qu'il y a une sorte de complot général duquel feraient part les journalistes occidentaux qui ne sont pas autorisés à parler de ça, c'est simplement faux. C'est simplement faux. Moi, je suis autorisé de parler de ce que je veux, tant que c'est un sujet journalistique et tant qu'il est jugé d'intérêt public par ma rédaction en chef.
Très bien. Je crois qu'il y avait d'autres questions de ce côté.
D'abord, bravo pour votre film. J'ai été bouleversé, même si je m'attendais un petit peu à ça. Alors, si on pensait qu'il y avait des criminels de guerre à l'État israélien, là, maintenant on en est complètement persuadé. Mais ma question, c'est comment vous avez pu sauver ces quelques images, techniquement parlant, quoi. Voilà, simplement.
Il y avait une autre question par ici.
Ma question est, pourquoi est-ce que vous avez pu penser que vous pourriez arriver à Gaza, avec tout ce qui s'est passé avant, avec les menaces qui étaient déjà dites avant? Avec quel espoir avez-vous que vous arriviez jusque là-bas?
Relating to the footage that I used in the film. Regarding the footage, it was compiled from a number of sources. So you might have seen some of the interviews that I did before the attack on the ship. That was from my camera. Then there was the footage of the attack itself. And then there were interviews with Israeli officials and other different types of footage. In regards to the footage prior to the attack, which I took with my camera, what happened at the time was I was filming with cassettes, actually, not an SD card, but rather cassettes. This was in 2010 still. So I had little mini cassettes at the time. And I filmed 10 cassettes before the attack, and they were in my bag. What happened was, of course, we were separated from our bags, our luggage and everything when they took us to the prison. And the Israelis confiscated everything that they could. So when my bag was returned to me in Turkey and I went to pick it up after they returned the ship, I opened up my bag and out of the 10 cassettes that I filmed, 6 were gone, but 4 were there. So I think they missed it just by accident, by luck, which was good. So I used that. Then there was the footage of the attack. Now that footage was smuggled off the ship by the cameraman of the Cultures of Resistance Network. And I need to give him credit because if it wasn't for him smuggling off that footage, this film would not have been possible. Now I know you want to know how he smuggled off the footage, but I can't tell you that. I cannot. Because, for a simple reason, we might have to use this same method again in the future. So I apologize for that. There was other footage, as you saw, which was the footage that was broadcast already, and they couldn't stop that footage from being broadcast because we switched to an alternative frequency. And as for the footage of the interviews with the Israeli officials, that was readily available on the internet, so I used that easily. So once again, I'm sorry I cannot give you that little piece of information that you're looking for. In regards to the question about why were we hopeful, well, as an activist, I have to stay hopeful, regardless. Now, why were we hopeful? In large part because we, maybe naively, but we did not think with such a flotilla, with all of the journalists we had on board, with all of the international citizens we had on board, we did not think that Israel would actually do what it did. We had hoped that we would actually reach Gaza. And so maybe this was naive thinking, some people might say, but prior to the flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla of 2010, as you heard Ken O'Keefe say on the ship, there were previous attempts to break the blockade, and some of those attempts did succeed in 2008 and up till 2009. And then they started stopping the ships in 2009 from reaching Gaza. So we thought, since it was such a big flotilla with all this media, we thought that we would actually be one of the success stories and reach Gaza. And this is part of the reason why we were hopeful. And I just want to add a final point is, after the 2010 Freedom Flotilla, as I mentioned in the film, the attempts continued, even by others, to break the blockade. Now, all of those attempts were stopped as well, but we need to keep trying. We need to keep going, because this is what the Israelis want. The Israelis want us, the Israeli government wants us to stop these attempts. They want us to give up. And as activists and as concerned citizens from around the world, we need to show them that we will not stop until we do break the blockade. So I want to say that the people who went on these attempts after the 2010 Freedom Flotilla, to me, they're the real heroes. They're very brave. I don't consider myself brave. They went after what happened with us, knowing the risks, and knowing that they could be detained, and knowing that they could be killed, yet they went regardless. So I need to highlight this and applaud them and salute them for their courage.
We may take maybe two last questions.
Bravo pour votre film, vraiment. J'avais une question par rapport à... En fait, j'avais entendu dire que c'était suite justement à ce qui s'est passé autour de cette flottille, que la première plainte internationale avait été mise contre l'État d'Israël par rapport à justement certaines blessures, ou je crois peut-être un mort qui avait eu dans un autre bateau qui était un ressortissant espagnol, et que justement l'État espagnol avait pour la première fois dans l'histoire émis une plainte au niveau international contre l'État d'Israël. Donc je ne sais pas si c'est vrai ou si je confonds avec un autre événement. Est-ce que vous en savez plus là-dessus? Parce que si tel est le cas, finalement cette aventure débouche quand même sur pas mal de choses positives, j'ai l'impression.
Thank you. I won't ask you, Rifat, we'll talk about it in the hotel. But I have a question for both of you. After the film, me and Saleh, we went outside, we were smoking, and we both kind of feel the same way. Although we know this footage, we've seen it, some of them, our friend, were on it, but we still, my blood is boiling. And I want to use that chance being here. You're a very well-known journalist, you cover the region. Riccardo is a very well-known scholar in the region. What is your advice to us? What should we do? we just don't really know what to do anymore. We use violence, they kill us. We use non-violence, they kill us. We don't do anything, they kill us. We use international law, it's not going anywhere. Is it really just black situation is not going to change? It's just Israel is above the law? What is the view from here, from Europe?
By the way, I want to ask the interpreters, am I holding the microphone close enough to... Okay, I apologize if I, at times, was not very clear. In regards to the Spanish dimension, let us say, as you saw, there were Spaniards with us on the flotilla, including Manuel. And Manuel, by the way, who you saw in the film, he was with me in the same section of the prison. So Manuel, I saw him recently, by the way, in Canada, and he's doing very well. The Spaniards who were with us on the ship, all of the ships, none of them were killed. However, you are correct in stating that there is a case in Spain. There is a court case that began in Spain based on what happened with the Spaniard citizens on the flotilla. So they opened a case in Spain in regards to what happened, using the concept, the legal concept of universal jurisdiction. Now, I'm not sure what the status is currently of the case in Spain, but there was a case opened there. In addition to the case in Spain, you might have seen at the end of the film, I said, and cases were opened in other countries. One other country that where a case was opened was South Africa. And that case there is still open. And in the South African case, now because it is open over there, there is a possibility that if certain Israeli officials travel to South Africa, they can be arrested there because of what happened on the flotilla. In addition to South Africa, there's the ICC case, the International Criminal Court, and this case is still open as well. And recently, about a week or 2 weeks ago, what is called the pre-trial chamber in the ICC, it has ordered the prosecutor to look into the case once again for the second time and consider opening an investigation in the case in the ICC. So these are positive developments for the flotilla and for the legal aspect of the flotilla. The case in Turkey, by the way, is still open now, and it's been appealed to a higher court. And last month I saw one of the lawyers who's working on the case in Turkey, and she said that they're still going through the appeals process, and it's in a higher court now in Turkey. So that's, in brief, what's happening with the legal cases as well.
So I'm going to answer to you in French, if you agree. We can have a cigarette then and talk in English. J'aimerais bien vous répondre un petit peu de manière, je sais pas optimiste, mais un tout petit peu, disons, particulière, quoi. Mais je suis comme nous tous, hein, effondré par ce qui se passe. D'autant plus que ce qui est très frappant, c'est que la question israélo-palestinienne, qui a été centrale, fondatrice de toute cette région et d'une bonne partie du monde, est devenue complètement marginale maintenant, parce qu'elle s'engouffre dans d'autres tragédies, dans d'autres drames, dans d'autres situations absurdes, compliquées, catastrophiques, horribles. Ouais. Donc de tout ça, qu'est-ce qui surgira? Je sais pas, mais un grand remodelage en tout cas, ça c'est clair. Donc qu'est-ce qu'on peut vous conseiller comme stratégie à partir de là? C'est de tenir la route, quoi, et de pas désespérer, quoi. Moi je vois pas d'autres dans le panorama actuel de voies ouvertes pour changer quelque chose. Franchement.
You asked me.
You're gonna fix it, Riccardo.
Sure, 5 minutes after the cigarette. No, I always thought, as a university professor, that I have nothing to tell you or the Israelis. First of all, I have to talk here in Europe to my concitizens. Second, I'm not Israeli, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Jew, hardly Christian, meaning that in my work, for me, what counts, since I work in research with youth, be they Palestinian, Israeli, or Arab, is that research, like the media, have a key role, education has a key role for change. I believe in that. Therefore, I don't think that is an European that has to tell you what should be done. An European has to tell Europeans in the Swiss democracy that, as the lady said before, we cannot tolerate that the Hasbara of the Israeli embassy is smearing and giving false news. This happens in Switzerland, I will fight against that. This is my position. But to go back to the debate and to conclude, because we have to leave the room, basically the story of the Hasbara is double-edged. The Israelis is not necessarily that they don't want people who protest. They are very useful. They can demonstrate, you see, this European and these Arabs anti-Semite. They can always play on that ground. Or they can use the other tactic with arguments on we are defending, blah, 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 blah. And when you have, and in that I join you completely, that the issue at stake is what the Turkish government does. Because if they conclude a political agreement and say, okay, let's put it under the carpet and we don't talk anymore, everything is fucked up. Sorry to be vulgar. No? So we are walking on a tightrope. And this is important, where Europeans have to speak and to defend international law and counteract propaganda. So I leave you the last word.
I wanted to mention something because you talked about countering propaganda. You used that phrase, and I want to mention something about propaganda itself. Many of us think of propaganda only as being lies. But the definition of propaganda is much bigger. Propaganda is not only lies. Propaganda is alteration or non-exposure of the truth in different methods. So one very important dimension of propaganda is censorship. It's what's not being said, not only what is being said. When I say censorship, I mean right now, as I'm sitting with you here, there are human rights violations taking place in Palestine. Do you hear about these in the media? Right now, in Gaza, right now, in the West Bank. Do we know this? If we don't know this, if we're not seeing this in the media, then this is censorship. Then this is propaganda that is taking place. I also call it passive propaganda, because nobody hears about it. But it's even more effective in many instances than what is being said. Because what is being said is limited. The lies, there are only so many lies that you can say. But now, constantly, there are many things happening that nobody is hearing about because of this censorship. This is also a propaganda dimension. So this is something that I just want everybody to think about when they leave here. And then ask their media outlets. Ask media outlets here or elsewhere. Why aren't you reporting on this? This is important, what is taking place. And by this we could start raising awareness with other people as well. So that's just one dimension that I wanted to mention. The last thing, if you allow me, Riccardo, was you saw right at the end of the film there were some links for the film, and if you're interested in the film, if you like the film, you'd like to support the film, or you know anybody who would like to support the film, please feel free to visit those links and promote the film or financially support it. And one final note, if anybody would like to do an on-camera interview afterwards, outside, just for 1 minute or so about their impressions of the film, I'd very much appreciate that as well. Thank you, and thanks again for coming.